Great. All right, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Rue, O'Farrell, and Lee. Mr. Buscaino is excused for this meeting. Ms. Kidd, would you officially call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Rue.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Buscaino is excused. Councilmember O'Farrell. Councilmember O'Farrell. You're on mute.
Having audio trouble. We can see you talking, but we can't hear you.
Oh, no. Okay, now it unmuted me. The button froze, but I am present. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So this time we'll take public comment on all items.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I forgot to
Speakers
call.
are going to have a minute if they are speaking on one item, or 2 minutes if they're speaking on multiple items, in addition to a minute for general public comment on matters under this committee's jurisdiction. Ms. Kidd, would you please provide the phone number for the public to call? And I'll just remind folks that, to keep your phone on mute or your device on mute while you're listening to the meeting so it doesn't interfere. Go ahead, Ms. Kidd. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. And just for the public, I want to confirm Councilmember Lee's attendance.
I'm present.
Thank you. And for public comment, members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-073-2397 and then press the number sign. Press the number sign again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to speak.
There are no public comment callers.
There are no callers? Okay, let the record reflect that no callers are calling in, and that will allow us then to move forward. So this time I'd like to recommend that we take, and if for some reason someone does call, is having trouble getting in, just let me know, because we want to make sure we give people a chance. I'd like to recommend that we take up items 2 and 3 on consent unless there is an objection. And for item 2, I'm going to recommend that we adopt the CAO report dated September 10th, 2020, and the 2 draft ordinances. I don't see any objection. I guess we need to do that as a vote. If we could vote on items 2 and 3 with the amended as stated, you could call the roll.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, the CAO report also includes a resolution.
Okay, so the item has the resolution. So we're adopting all 3. Is that what you're saying?
If you would like, the CAO report, the resolution, and the 2 ordinances.
Okay, great. Oh, that's fine. Recommend that we adopt all 3, the resolution as well as the 2 items. Just looking at it here. So yes, unless there is an objection, we're going to take well, I guess we have to take a roll call vote because it's an audio meeting. So if you could call the roll on these items, please.
Calling the roll to approve items 2 and 3 as specified by the chair. Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Rue.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino is absent. Councilmember O'Farrell.
Aye.
And Lee.
Aye.
4 ayes, these items are approved.
Wonderful, thank you. If you would now read item number 1 into the record.
Item number 1 is a controller report relative to the opportunity to advance city contracting equity through the Business Improvement Program and building on existing efforts to use the city's contracting dollars to support local businesses.
Great, thank you. And so we have with us Bob Wingenroth and Devansh Panchal to present the controller's report. And I apologize if I butchered your name. You'll correct me, I hope. You're going to present the controller's report on the Business Inclusion Program, And the council, we've put a lot of things in motion recent months. We're open to changes to improve inclusivity if it can come, if Prop 209 is repealed by the voters. And the report, as you know, is going to show the council and the controller are pretty much in lockstep when it comes to improving business inclusion. So the floor is yours. Take it away. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So my name is Devang Panchal. I'm the Chief Internal Auditor here with our Audit Services Division at the Controller's Office. I want to thank the committee chair, his staff, and the rest of the members of the committee for the opportunity to present. We recognize that issues of equity and inclusion, I think, are at the forefront of everyone's mind right now. Certainly here at the city, I think we're all looking to find ways to do more and to re-examine how we go about our business on a daily basis. And so we hope that this report is sort of a step in that direction. And, like you said, like the chair mentioned, there's been lots of ongoing activity in this area in recent months. And so we tried to craft a report that had a set of practical recommendations that could hopefully serve as a roadmap for the city to navigate things on a go-forward basis. I'm joined here by Bob Wingenroth, who's our Director of Auditing. And again, we're excited to share our report with you. Just to give you some background, we actually started this report before the onset of the pandemic and sort of before this dialogue, I think this conversation that's been taking place over the last couple of months, about inclusion and equity. But the city's has a number of things in place and has had so for a number of years. And so, like any other program, those things sort of, we hope to provide a fresh look at those and maybe to provide some ideas for improvement and maybe some changes. And so that's where we came from as we started this project. As you all know, the city spends billions and billions of dollars each year on commodities, on professional services, and on construction. And so I think we're all looking for ways to how do we best harness that spending and that contracting power in order to, sort of go about things and do things that make good business sense for the city and sort of, realize those cost efficiencies from the private sector, but also how do we leverage that purchasing authority in order to help small and local businesses or disadvantaged businesses, for example, businesses owned by women, people of color, veterans, things like that. And so we recognize that there's a number of different things that the city is doing. The primary focus of our report was the business inclusion program. And just to give, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the way the program works, but I think it bears mentioning for members of the public out there who might not, be familiar with it. But it's primarily outreach based, and it's about outreach and notification. And so, the city's hoping to facilitate business partnerships between prime contractors and subcontractors.
And then he unmuted.
But
Right. Okay.
primarily, and you mentioned Proposition 209, primarily due to limitations in place due to Proposition 209 at the state level, the city, unlike some jurisdictions outside of California, cannot use race or gender as a factor in making contract awards. And so a lot of that is baked into the design of the program, which is driving why it's primarily notification based. And the city, the city requires prime contractors to conduct the outreach and to notify subcontractors about business opportunities. But the decision to ultimately enter into that business partnership is up to the prime. And the city certainly when it comes to businesses that are certified to businesses that are certified as women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses, the city lacks the ability to require prime contractors to participate with them to partner with them as subcontractors. So that's sort of an overview of the program itself. We took all of that into consideration. I think along with all of that, in the background is the city's decentralized procurement network, which we all know has its pluses and its minuses, right? Departments are sort of best positioned to launch their own procurements, but at the same time, not being able to do that in sort of a cohesive, centralized way also comes with its own negatives. And so some of those issues and challenges find their way into the administration of the business inclusion program. But our report had 5 primary recommendations, 3 of which were directly related to improving administration of the business inclusion program. The first one was to redesign the prime contractor outreach process to promote streamlined and meaningful outreach to certified firms, including small businesses, local businesses, and businesses owned by women, people of color, and veterans. I think one thing that I'm guessing you've also heard from stakeholders that comes up over and over again is that the outreach process to the subcontractors, to the potential subcontractors who are interested in participating in doing business with the city, the outreach process for them often feels very superficial. And, you know, the prime contractors who are interested in going this route will do so, and the ones who aren't won't. And so, you know, as part of this project, we went and got ourselves, you know, we sort of simulated what the outreach process would look like. And there's a lot of discretion involved there. And again, it sort of just depends on what the prime contractor's intentions are. And so part of what we tried to do was to look at that process and ask ourselves questions about, are there opportunities for the city to do more? So I'll get back to the doing more piece. But just to sort of close out business inclusion, one of the other things that we recommended, because we have this decentralized procurement framework, the program was created in 2011 by executive directive, and there's a little bit of inconsistency in terms of how it's being administered within each department's procurement system, within each department's individual procurement. And so, you know, when you're looking at the program, it begs the question, is it achieving its goals? Is it maybe not achieving its goals because it's being inconsistently administered by the departments, or is it, are there larger design issues that sort of warrant re-examination? And so finding a way to centralize that authority and oversight is something that we think is really important in order to truly be able to examine the program and evaluate whether it's functioning as best as it could. We know there's been movement in recent months in terms of the city bringing on a chief procurement officer. That's obviously a really important step, and the chief procurement officer and her team have been a really valuable source of information for us in terms of better understanding how the program works and sort of outline what their vision looks like in terms of making some of the larger changes that need to be made. So that sort of speaks to departmental administration and things of that nature. And the last business inclusion recommendation, you know, I think like everyone else, we wanted to try and get our arms around, well, how many contracts are being awarded through this process? How often do subcontractors actually get us up, you know, actually partner with a prime as a direct result of this process, this outreach and notification process? And what we quickly came to realize is that because so much of this is administered at the departmental level and there's some inconsistency there, there really isn't any reliable information that's out there in terms of looking at contract awards. I know the council, I believe back in 2016, sort of requested city departments to report back with some data, and there were just some inconsistencies and concerns about the reliability of what that information looked like. So again, really critical elements, you know, of the program that would put the city in a position to evaluate whether it's functioning at best it could, just aren't there. And so some of that might be resolved by some of the changes that we're making in terms of procurement reform and some of the larger system issues that are being addressed through that effort. But we thought it was important to sort of point that out as part of this, because sort of answering the really basic question about, is the program working, and are there maybe certain businesses, are there certain businesses that are maybe being left behind? It's really difficult to answer those questions right now. So that sort of speaks to the business inclusion program. Like I mentioned earlier, we also tried to seek out ways to do more sort of outside of the business inclusion program. And one of the things that we realized is that you know, the city's proprietary departments have taken a number of steps, have taken additional steps that move the needle a little bit further than our outreach and notification approach through business inclusion. And each of the 3 proprietary departments, and it's on a case-by-case basis, but each of them is sort of moved toward doing mandatory small business participation on contracts when it's appropriate. And so they moved away from the outreach and notification, and it's sort of, developed a system where, on a given contract, if their procurement personnel see that there's robust enough of a market for local or small businesses to participate, they're setting actual participation requirements, say 20%, for example, or 30% on a given contract. I think the challenging thing there is that each of those proprietary departments has its own procurement function, right? They have dedicated staff who know their industry, and they have subject matter experts who can make those decisions about what's an appropriate target. Are there enough small businesses who can meaningfully compete for this? And all city departments don't necessarily have that same level of procurement expertise built in. I think, I use the Bureau of Contract Administration as a great example. They've been a really helpful resource throughout this entire process in helping us learn about the program, but also pointing out that a one-size-fits-all approach on subcontracting on small business participation minimums might not be the best approach. So we think it requires some thought in crafting what this might look like, and that's why we're recommending it as a pilot for the city, for the council control departments. And the last piece is just, in thinking about equity and thinking about inclusion and thinking about economic development, I think what we all have in our minds in terms of helping smaller businesses, local businesses truly grow is, right now a lot of our efforts are directed to helping them compete for subcontracting opportunities. And, just looking at the bigger picture and thinking about the larger goal of sort of moving them out of competing just for subcontracting and moving them towards towards a future where they build capacity, they gain expertise, they sort of advance in their ability to compete for prime contracts is something that I think all of us agree on. The sort of how to get there is always the question. And one valuable way we thought would help is to develop a pilot small business mentorship program. And so looking for ways, I think that happens on an ad hoc basis, but maybe developing something a little bit more formal and, putting some metrics behind it, putting some incentives in place in order to compel primes to do so is something that we thought would be a step in the right direction for us.
Did you hear it? Yeah.
But those are the 5 sort of high-level recommendations from the report. Bob and I are happy to answer any questions or discuss any of these in further detail. We're sort of, as you wish to proceed.
Great. Well, thanks. Let's start with the last point first about the mentorship programs. Is that just a city innovation, or are the proprietary departments also implementing that kind of thing, mentorship programs, or other cities, large cities, doing the same kind of thing?
We've seen some other cities taking steps in that direction. I believe the city of, naturally, there's only so many cities as large as Los Angeles, but I believe the city of Milwaukee is taking steps in that direction. I'd have to go back and check, but this issue sort of emerged through our research as something that even in locations that have the similar restrictions in place in terms of race and gender, this was a tool that they used to try and help grow some of these smaller businesses and sort of help them navigate what, let's be honest, can be a complex ecosystem here in terms of doing business with the city.
Right. And the proprietaries today, is this new for them, or it sounds like they're ahead of us in some ways as a city in terms of forcing these subcontractors to be more inclusive, but are they also ahead of us on the mentorship programs?
I believe my recollection is that, it's happening probably on an ad hoc basis there. We didn't see necessarily a sort of fully formed program where that's in place. So that might be something the city might want to look at just, across the board, council control and proprietary.
Right. And of course, the big overarching issue, and you mentioned it, is that the limitations we have in California because of Prop 209, which that may change radically come November. And that's, I guess, before we do anything, we really want to see what's going to happen there. How do you see our programs changing if the voters do repeal Prop 209?
Sure. I'm glad you asked that. It's the question, right? So November is fast approaching, and the landscape in terms of Prop 209 restrictions might look vastly different in a short amount of time. And so one of the things that'll be critical, if Prop 209 were to be repealed, the city is still going to need to show that these kinds of contracting disparities exist and have existed. And then if the city were, if it were to be repealed, the city would need to develop sort of a narrowly tailored program to address those disparities. And so this goes back to the recommendation about improving how the data is collected and reported. Right now, I think there's no centralized database. Each department's tracking it slightly differently. And so the city's ability to quickly compile that information and sort of present it is going to be essential if it does get repealed.
So you're saying we won't be able to radically change things right away. We'll have to compile the data first.
The way that any kind of contracting preference program has worked in other jurisdictions is that you formally have to show that these disparities exist in the contracting world. And so being able to summon that data and show that hypothetically businesses owned by women have been underrepresented in certain areas of city contracting would be part of developing any narrowly tailored program that would sort of pass legal muster in terms of remediating those kinds of disparities.
Okay. And then last thing for me, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues. I've always felt like, and I've said this in lots of different hearings, that the biggest thing that we could do to get more small businesses, minority-owned businesses, is to pay our bills. I view that as the biggest barrier. One of the reasons why we only end up often with these large companies that can float a city payment process that is so woefully behind that any regular business would be bankrupt by the time they get paid, which is shameful. So has the Controller's Office done auditing of the city's payment of bills system, and how much of that do you think is really part of this whole equation?
Mr. Chair, this is Bob Wingenroth. I'm so glad that you brought up that issue. We agree with you 100%. In the Controller's Office, we're responsible in the end for paying the bills. And we look for three things. Number one, is there a contract? Number two, is there money budgeted for that contract? And number three, is there an approved invoice? So we have an invoice from the vendor that's approved by the department. When we get those three items, we can deliver a check to the vendor within 2 to 3 business days. And so I think that Devang mentioned earlier, I think one of the issues is when we have a company that's working with a prime and they're a subcontractor, they're quite a ways down the line. And so the more folks that we can move into that they are our contractor, that we have a contract with them, and that our department is reviewing their invoices, I think that's one mechanism that we can deliver the payment to them much more quickly. We also, in the Controller's Office, we're working with departments, any department that wants our help to help them with their internal process to get the contract done and to have a proper invoice that can be approved by them. We're ready to step in and help them because we hear you loud and clear, and we want to be part of the solution.
Colleagues, any questions? Mr. Rube.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this presentation. It is very timely, and I like everything that I'm hearing, and hopefully the state proposition will pass and restore affirmative action so it could give us additional tools. I just had a couple other questions. have you guys looked into also one of the things for contracting, especially with minority businesses or small businesses, is also the fact that they might not be as experienced or not be in the business arena for a long time, or doesn't meet other requirements like financial requirements. I know for subcontractors it's a lot more lax, but have you guys thought about somehow addressing those issues? Because sometimes if you don't have X amount of credit, several $1 million in credit line, or have so much money in the bank, then you don't qualify just for that reason alone. So have you thought about lowering those thresholds, or thinking of some sort of cobbling organizations together? I mean,
Sure. So the primary focus of this report was looking at business inclusion and sort of opportunities to harness the city's purchasing power. But I think all those points you made are really important points. The city has a number of other different programs in place that are intended to help smaller businesses get off the ground and sort of navigate what is complex. I know part of lowering bonding requirements and finding ways to help smaller businesses navigate that process is something that's part of those programs. But though, sort of taking a look at those was not the focus of this particular report.
is that something we could? Do we need to instruct you to do so, or is that, since this is more of like a pilot? You said, can you do that on your own, or do you want us to instruct you on that? Well, Mr. Chair, if we could maybe add a friendly amendment of, I don't know what the language would be, but basically what we just talked about, right? Looking at the current threshold barrier, or I don't know, if the city clerk could help me phrase that.
Yeah, I mean, just saying the recommendation here is to note and file the report. So it may be a separate action that we could take, or a separate motion to do that, because there's not. I don't ask the city attorney, but I don't know how we add that to a note and file.
Well, then you know what? If I could just then just alert the department of that aspect as we go forward, because I'm sure we're going to hear from the department again on this as it goes further. But if you could keep that in mind as well, because I know I was meeting with a lot of women, black women entrepreneurs, and part of their problem was they couldn't even get in the front door, right? They couldn't even, they weren't even qualified to even knock on the door. So
we could add it as a recommendation. We can note and file and have a recommendation at the same time.
Yeah, and Councilmember, there are, I believe, several other council files that are active on issues that are all interconnected with this, including perhaps overhauling bid preferences or monitoring Prop 209 and coming back with recommendations about next steps should Prop 209 be repealed. And I'll mention just for the record, because the question was asked about sort of a post Prop 209 scenario. I mean, in terms of bid preferences, the city charter is another thing that sort of might limit the city in what things it can do. Even with a properly conducted disparity study, there are certain limitations in the city charter. But I think that may be something that the CLA was going to maybe look at and report back, as it continues to monitor the status of Prop 209. So there's a number of council actions out there where these things are being sort of discussed. So it may be within that. I don't necessarily know off the top of my head where that would best fit.
that works for me. And I also want to second what our chair said, Councilmember Blumenfield, about the mentor protege program, because that actually kind of addresses that as well. So I think this is a great first step, and I look forward to all the other things that we work on.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rue, for bringing that up. I think that this is an opportunity for us to look at the criteria, whether it's related to limits from our own charter or whether it's related to just policy, that we should look at the criteria through the racial disadvantage lens, right? Whether it's a threshold of assets or cash on hand or credit, whatever it may be, in this moment of reckoning, we need to look at all areas of what puts someone at a greater disadvantage simply because of institutional disadvantages that already existed before these programs even came about. So I think this extra level of scrutiny on the criteria is a really good area to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Lee?
So thank you for the presentation, Mr. Panchal. I think this council agrees that any opportunity to help the smaller companies, there's always been barriers, and my colleagues have pointed out some of those. So I really appreciate this report today, and any opportunity that we, obviously can be of assistance is something that we're always looking for. I'm always looking for that opportunity for all the different small and even medium-sized businesses in my district to help out. So thank you so much. Very informational.
Great. Without seeing no additional questions, I don't see any. The recommendation will be to note and file, and obviously we'll await what happens in November before taking the next actions, because that will very much help determine what those steps are. So, Ms. Kidd, would you call the roll for the note and file?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Calling the roll to note and file item number 1, Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Rue.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino is not in attendance. O'Farrell.
Aye.
And Lee.
Aye.
4 ayes. This item is noted and filed.
Great, thank you. And I believe that clears the desk. Is there anything else before us?
We have item number 4, a possible closed session. Would you like me to?
Yes, thank you. I almost forgot critical item number 4. So let's move to item 4, if you would. Thank you.
Item number 4.
I think we need to, if we're going to go into closed session, we're going to need to ready the room at that point. But if you would, I guess we first need to read the item into the record, correct?
Yes. Item number 4, the committee may recess to closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1 to confer with its legal counsel relative to the case entitled Venice Investors, LLC versus the City of Los Angeles Superior Court Case Number SC 116345. This case arises from a quiet title and declaratory relief against the city arising out of a disputed street easement over a portion of Venice Boulevard that is no longer being used as a roadway.
Okay, and so now we will go into closed session. Mr. Jordan, what do we need to do to legally be in closed session now? You're on mute.
We have, I believe there's a Zoom meeting that is how the public participates. I believe our closed session attendees are within our Google meeting, so I think the Zoom meeting will need to be turned off. And then the broadcast on council phone will need to be also suspended because we don't want to broadcast our closed session. So, and then the folks that are in the Google room, it needs to be confined to the people that are germane to this particular issue. So,
okay, well, I have confirmation the Zoom is ended, and in the meeting room, turning off the device, Ms. Kidd, is that something you can confirm has been turned off?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, as soon as I have your permission, I'll stop the Google recording and go off air.
Okay. Anything else we need to do, Mr. Jordan, or can I give permission at this point?
well, I'm looking at the list of folks that are in the Google meeting. Normally, we would only have those people that are sort of essential for the closed session meeting. So if we have other city staff that were here perhaps for other items on the meeting, it would be appropriate to excuse them as well. I see our city attorney, Michael Kaplan, will be talking about this item should you have questions. He is in the room, so he should obviously stay. But if there's other folks that are not, part of this aspect of the meeting, it would be appropriate for them to essentially step out of the room or step out of the Google meeting at this time.
Okay, well, I think everyone is well, I guess we can go through if everyone just identify themselves as why. I mean, we can see the members on staff, but the folks who are not, if you could just identify yourself, and then we'll determine that you're part of the meeting.
Good afternoon. Michael Kaplan on behalf of the City Attorney's Office from the Real Property and Environment Division.
Okay. We see Mandy Morales
Yes, with the City Clerk's Office. Thank you.
and Matthew Shade,
Yeah, this is Matthew Shade with the CLA's office.
Andrew Wang,
Hi there. I'm with ITA.
Cecilia Castillo, and did I Erlich King?
Eric D with C12.
Okay, so Jordan, are we?
I think we're good now, and our representative from ITA is Mr. Wang. I would recommend that he be allowed to remain as well, particularly because, in the event any technical difficulty arises during the meeting.
Great. So the room is now defined. We have 12 people in the room. All have been identified. And Ms. Kidd, if you would formally take us into closed session.
The meeting is now being recorded.
Great. We're back into open session. Mr. Jordan, is there anything to report?
No, there was nothing to report.
Okay. Then is there anything else, Ms. Kidd, before us, or can we adjourn?
Nothing else is before us, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this meeting. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.